Hi, I'm Jared Brennan, and I'm a cybersecurity strategy and solutions advisor. That's just a fancy way of saying that I work with C-level security executives and their teams to understand strategies for their security program, things that will enable the business to continue to fulfill their mission without disruption. And not just talk strategy, but also talk about practical activities, advice for how we can do this stuff day to day to have a measurable positive impact on the organization. With the rise of social and collaboration platforms globally, especially over the past couple of years, we've seen cyber threats shift into these spaces, taking advantage of gaps in visibility and controls that many organizations have. What I wanted to share with you today is insights into how you can lean into these tools, how you can enable the business to use what they've invested in to accomplish the mission of the organization. Before I get into that, though, I have a few names I want to share with you. Robin Sage, Mia Ash, and Marcela Flores. Have you heard of any of these folks? If not, it's okay. I'll share some info on them in just a bit, but I just wanted to plant that seed. We'll come back to that. So far here at the event, what you've heard is a legal perspective on ransomware from Lisa, talking about a very highly publicized incident and some perspectives of what it's like from the legal perspective to respond to and manage that activity. You've also heard about investigating cyber attacks from a technical perspective from one of the leading vendors in this space, Sean, sharing that information. And then from an IT resiliency standpoint, we had a team of folks from Cardinal Health providing insights into how we keep businesses operating, how we continue to function even when things don't go as planned. And whether it was today or whether you've heard this at some point in your career, you've probably heard in the work environment, it's not personal, it's just business. But it is personal. Every one of us has lives outside of our day jobs. The customers, the students, the people who rely on us are trying to accomplish their own goals, their own objectives. And when we look at what we do from a technology standpoint, it can have a very real impact on their ability to do what they've set out to do. And from a personal perspective, their information has value. Cyber criminals have been selling data on underground black markets for years. And we have data, folks. We have actual numbers for what they'll pay for credit cards, for social security numbers, for healthcare records. And it's continuing to shift, but the value doesn't change significantly. It's still there. If there is information that a cyber criminal can get their hands on, and then turn that information into a profit, they're looking for a path of least resistance. How quickly can I get this data and share it? And when we look at attack surface, it's not just the technology, but it's the people. And we've known this. We have security programs that focus on awareness training, and we have anti-phishing programs. But step back for a second and take a look at this from an attack surface perspective. On average, most users have around 40 apps on their smartphones. I am an outlier. I've probably got close to 200. I am a nerd. I embrace that fully, but I want to try these technologies, see what they do, and find ways to enhance my life, to simplify things through these applications. And I have a hunch that you may have more than 40 yourself. The average number of social media accounts per person, 8. It's actually 8.4, but I don't want to get into the dot numbers here. How many of these accounts are abandoned? How many social media accounts do you use versus how many social media accounts have you set up at one point that you've never turned off? And the average number of SaaS applications per organization, 80. And I've got links to all these statistics at the end. If you talk to some of the folks here at the university, it might be closer to 8,000. But I'll let you have that conversation on your own. When we look at the use of these different technologies that live outside of a security team's control, especially if it's a personal device, if it's, definitely a personal social media account, or even an application that may have been set up without involving the centralized IT or security departments. That's a lot of opportunity for a cyber criminal to go directly at someone who works for your organization, and for you to have no visibility into what's happening there at all. And as we look at the impact that the pandemic has had on how we collaborate with one another, the rise of video conferencing applications and collaboration tools like the one we're using right now, it's been astronomical. It's something that we hadn't or couldn't have fully predicted, but we're living in the middle of it. And people are figuring out, how do I collaborate with people that I don't see in person, that I don't talk to, that I don't directly, that I may never meet for as long as I have a relationship here. And all of these elements combined, we pull them together, and we've created a breeding ground for cyber criminals. There's opportunity for them to take advantage of us, the security professionals, just trying to catch up to put controls and policy in place. So let me step back. This is not new. The attacks we're seeing today are not a result of the pandemic. They're not a result of us using collaboration tools more quickly today. We've been seeing this for quite some time. Do you know who Robin Sage is? So this is her photo, only Robin Sage is not a real person. She was created by some cybersecurity researchers to demonstrate over a decade ago that by using social media profiles that belong to people that the victims may be more inclined to engage with, that they were able to trick people into connecting and sharing information that they shouldn't have shared. It's social engineering enabled through these social media platforms. And while this was more of a, I don't want to say a thought experiment, but it definitely wasn't criminal activity. It was one of the earliest examples that we've got of seeing this rise of social and collaboration tools and the disconnectedness of our personal lives, putting people at a higher risk of being compromised. So how about Mia Ash? Mia Ash is a photographer, a lot of Instagram activity, but also she doesn't exist. Now, this is a real person, a real photographer, but the profile took this young woman's photos and created an online persona that could be used to target individuals. I believe this one may have been in the aerospace industry, engineers, to sharing information. And the big shift here between Robin Sage and Mia Ash is that this was a state-sponsored event. This was attackers at a national level with resources and capabilities beyond the script kiddie living in their parents' basement, targeting people in a highly sensitive industry, people with access to sensitive research. More recently, Marcelo Flores, a yoga instructor who, again, not real, but she was used in a very similar attack, also state-sponsored, targeting individuals through social platforms, using social engineering to trick them into divulging sensitive information. And even just this, it's been this month or last month, it's been very, very recent that Kumsong 121, we're seeing a North Korean group. I'm not a fan of the acronym APT. I know we use it, but an advanced persistent threat, just I think of it as a cyber criminal or a cybercrime organization with resources. In this case, again, state-sponsored, using social media to deliver malware to Android-based smartphones and compromised devices through that channel. So this is not hypothetical, right? This is not anything new. And these are only the high-profile examples that we've seen. I am certain that there are many, many examples that are not publicly available, that the people who've been compromised either weren't required to disclose, were too embarrassed to share that information. But it's an actual threat vector that we're seeing on a regular basis. And it's getting even more challenging for security teams to defend, because this gentleman on the left, does not exist. That is not a real person. The website, this person does not exist, again, included in the links, will give you picture after picture of AI altered images that combine images of individuals to create someone who isn't a real person. If I'm creating a social media profile and I want to make sure that you can't find references to the person that I'm imitating anywhere, I have an entire library of profile pics on that website. And on the right, some of you may recognize former President Obama and Jordan Peele, one of my favorite filmmakers. Jordan Peele from the Key and Peele comedy sketch show. He's got a great Obama impersonation. And I linked to a BuzzFeed article that talks about the deep fake video that has Jordan impersonating Obama, but it's a video that appears to be Obama delivering an address, a message, saying things he would never say on camera. It's getting more and more challenging to distinguish between what's real and what's not real. And if attackers are already using these vectors, social and collaboration channels, and they have these technologies available, it puts us at a severe disadvantage in how to detect and defend against them. So let me talk about some specific attack scenarios. We're here on a video conference event, and in higher education, as a parent of 2 college students and 1 high school senior, I am fully aware of what the shift has meant in online learning. The company I'm with, Safeguard Cyber, talks to people on a regular basis about protecting these collaboration channels. And one of my peers was having a conversation with someone in higher ed who said, we had someone log on to a Zoom class, a professor and a number of students, and a handful of students turned their cameras off. They all changed their name to say the exact same thing. And then one of them went into chat and issued a physical threat to the professor. Now, how do you know? From an IT perspective, if you're investigating that event, how do you know which individual issued that threat? If they have found a way to cloak themselves, to mask themselves, now we're not just seeing a risk of personally identifiable information, we're seeing a risk to physical safety, but we're seeing the collaboration channels being used to issue the threats that could ultimately lead to something very unfortunate. More recently, another peer that I work with mentioned that there was a LinkedIn Live event that had a member of the LGBT community speaking on diversity and inclusion, and someone in that event joined and began harassing live, shouting the person down, saying some fairly terrible things. And if we're leaning into these technologies to do business, to teach, to educate, to collaborate, to do research, how do we protect the people who are using these technologies from events like that? From an intellectual property perspective, if I'm looking in the research community, we had a very high profile breach earlier this year from EA, Electronic Arts. And if you're a gamer, which I very much am, then this one is one you may have watched closely. Now, a little bit of history here. EA actually had a breach last year with their FIFA competitive league. FIFA, right? The soccer American version of football. But we had a personally identifiable information breach where their data was compromised through these servers. So EA was already under the microscope. More recently, an attacker went to the dark web and bought an authorization token for their Slack instance. So you plug it into your browser, right? Just a cookie, whatever it was. And when you go to their Slack website, it thinks you've already logged in as an employee. And once they were in, now they're not having to socially engineer their way through LinkedIn or Facebook. They're in Slack and they appear to be an employee who's supposed to be there. They poked around, found the IT channel, the help desk channel, said, hey, I lost my phone at a party this weekend. Here's my new phone number. Can you send me a new 2-factor token so I can log in and do my job? And the help desk did what they were supposed to do. They issued a token. They issued a new MFA authentication option, which allowed the attackers to come in, get to the FIFA source code, and the Frostbite engine source code, which underneath Battle.net, one of their more popular properties. Between the two, what do I want to say, intellectual property, the two games and the engine that were compromised, it's estimated to be over $3 billion in IP that is now available on the dark web. That code is in the wild, and they've lost control of it. Now, this is an example of somebody stealing something that wasn't meant to be public, which if you're in the research space, you may have things that will eventually be public, but until they are, you're trying to protect them both in terms of confidentiality and integrity. Had the attacker chosen to go into that same code and inject something malicious to alter the code, they could continue to compromise EA customers for months, if not years to come, until that's discovered. And this is an example of attackers using these collaboration tools to take advantage of us just trying to figure out how to be resilient, how to operate in this current environment. And it's not always that complicated. One of my friends on Facebook, yes, big social media user here, shared this on her profile. And she was absolutely correct. If you have folks who are answering questions on those fun little quizzes on different social platforms, they're sharing the information that allows an attacker to reset their password. So it's another example of why social has become so attractive to cyber criminals. It is rich with open source intelligence and information that you can use to precondition someone to a social engineering attack. And what you see here on the left is an actual email I received here at the company, where someone reached out, and the email address that was sent was a dead giveaway. The fact that it was in my spam folder also a giveaway. But I see these email messages fairly often that leader of the organization needs me to drop what I'm doing and give them something. And we've seen business email compromise fairly commonly. This has been happening for some time, and chances are you've got something in place that's looking at your email environment that you control, that you manage. Now take a look at what's on the right. This is one I sent through WhatsApp, right? Mobile messaging app that chances are you may have some folks using it. And what I did is I created a similar preconditioning scenario, social engineering scenario, but I came up with a story. Hey, I have urgency, I have authority, and I need you to do something quickly to help me out. While most organizations have addressed business email compromise, attackers have shifted to business communication compromise. And whether they're doing this through WhatsApp or WeChat or Telegram, whether they're doing it through LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, the chances of an attacker targeting your people continue to rise, as we've seen from some of these other stories. So what can we do about it? This is the strategy into execution part. I approach any challenge that I face with a handful of questions. I try to boil it down to some of the most important questions, and I wanted to share this with you today. While I'm asking these questions, I want to emphasize what we heard from the Cardinal team. Focus on business resilience. It's not the resiliency of your IT systems on an island unto themselves. It's not the resiliency of your security controls, but it's how all of this ties in to delivering the goods and services that you're delivering to your constituents, to your end users. Cloud technology is not going anywhere, folks. The notion of keeping everything on-prem is cost prohibitive, and as cloud gets more and more accessible and affordable, financially accessible, we're going to find more and more organizations saying, look, I don't have a choice. We've got to do this in these cloud technologies where security of the cloud and security in the cloud comes into play. But take advantage of the resilience offered by these cloud providers and focus on enabling the business. It's about minimizing disruption by managing risk. You want to help them do what they're trying to do so that you don't have to turn off features, or you don't have to tell them you can't use this application, give them a way to do what they're going to do so they don't go around your organization and do it anyway, which leaves them exposed and leaves you with zero visibility into what they're doing. And this isn't just hypothetical when I talk about resiliency. OSU had this story that came out earlier this year talking about the relationship between ODEE and College Ready Ohio, helping K-12 schools lean into this remote learning. It's not just how do we hit our quarterly numbers, which we see in the private space or in sales organizations, but when it comes to education, how do we help kids get access to this information? How do we help adult learners who are trying to create a better lives for themselves get this access? So that resiliency isn't just metrics on a dashboard. It's personal, and it affects real people at home. So the first question I would encourage you to ask is visibility. Do you have visibility into your collaboration and social channels? Now, this gets a little tricky. First, well, Jared, how do I even know what collaboration tools we're using? You can look at your CMDB. You can look at your inventory system and hopefully see asset owners and what's come through. You can look at procurement and see what you're paying bills for. Highly recommend, by the way, when it comes to SaaS. But I'm a big fan of open source intelligence gathering. I've got a few Google hacks here. They are rock simple, but you can plug these in and change up the school name however you'd like. But if you look for things like Zoom and the name of your school, or you look for things like Teams and the domain of the school, mix and match these components. And what you'll find are not just the collaboration platforms that you may already know of because you've had that conversation with procurement, but you'll find the research team that stood up that Slack instance and has been exchanging information with people around the world because that's what they were hired to do. They are trying to complete this research so they can publish, so they can change people's lives for the better. And if they've set something up to enable them to collaborate, open source intelligence gathering can help you find that information. And while you're looking at these collaboration tools, I also recommend you do some sort of survey, because with mobile messaging apps, they have risen in popularity as well. But we see a lot of organizations shrugging, saying, yeah, well, I mean, what can I do if they're using WhatsApp, if they're using WeChat, if they're using Signal? While some of these technologies like WhatsApp and Signal are very well known for their end-to-end encryption, but they do provide organizations, especially if you've got a managed instance in the WhatsApp and in the WeChat case as well, the ability to put controls in place. If it's provided by the organization, you can gain visibility into these channels, but you have to ask people. I would just very low-tech solution, a simple survey to your end users to get a feel for what populations are using which technologies. And then another thing, and this is getting very nerdy, when we look at social platforms, how your organizations are using social media is just a crucial conversation. And traditionally, organizations have said we can't do anything with social media. I mean, we have our managed accounts, but we can't provide protection. We can't gain visibility into these other accounts. And the answer is yes, you can. Every major social platform has published APIs that you can use to communicate with internal systems and those technologies. Now, the scope of those APIs, what they can see, is going to vary, especially depending on how you're authenticating with the API. But from a technical standpoint, it is no longer reasonable to say we just technically can't do it, because they have intentionally published these to enable you, these APIs to enable you to do things that you're trying to accomplish, which includes providing security for the people on these platforms. So understand that, when you're asking, well, do we even have visibility? Do that asset inventory and get an understanding of the capabilities of these platforms, these technologies. The second recommendation I have, or question I would ask, is, have you centralized all things identity? While I'm here at Safeguard Cyber, we focus on helping organizations understand risk around these collaboration channels. But previously, I spent time with some very high-profile identity vendors, and I have had more conversations over the past few years about building identity programs than I can remember. Centralizing all of your identity things is crucial to reining in these platforms and enabling these security controls to help them embrace everything the platforms have to offer. One of my favorite organizations in this space is the Identity Defined Security Alliance. Julie Smith, formerly with Optiv, left to go to the IDSA and to form what was initially a collaboration between Ping Identity and Optiv, and now has grown into dozens of contributors, vendors, consultancies, and customers, all providing insight through these technical working groups into what identity should look like both today and in the future. And they have a lot of research that they're publishing, white papers, but the two resources that I absolutely recommend, bookmark today, share with your teams, the security outcomes and approaches, and you can see the link here, and the best practices. Security outcomes and approaches is very, I don't want to say it's binary, but it's almost like a technical checklist. Are we doing this? Are we identifying high-risk events in these collaboration tools and then disabling identities once an event is detected? Are we going through an attestation process following a high-risk event before we turn something back on to make sure the risk has been remediated, not for the account, which may be a single account in a single application, but for the identity, right? Me, Jared, flesh and blood, all the things I have access to, and I just happen to have one account that's part of all that access. The security outcomes are a terrific resource to help you get your head around that. And then best practices is more around, I see this as more of a Q&A, a conversational resource to go throughout your organization and say, are we doing things the way we want to be doing them? I often combine the best practices. It asks questions around privilege management and questions around access management, questions around what you're doing with some sort of centralized directory. And I blend that with the capability maturity model, a simple 1 through 5 scale to say we're either not doing anything automated. We've got one person here who knows how to do it and just hope they don't get hit by a bus, all the way up to optimized, which is it is truly aligned from a technology, security, and business perspective that what we're using and how we're doing it is enabling us to accomplish the mission of the organization. Again, the security outcomes and approaches and best practices are going to help you leapfrog forward in putting identity controls in place around these different technologies. From an access standpoint, I like to bring everything back to this specific sentence. Do the right people have the right access to the right things at the right time? That is, in my experience, it's common language among identity vendors when we're talking about what identity means, identity and access management, identity governance and administration, privilege management. All of these components all boil down to the right people having the right level of access to the right stuff when they need it, the right time. But there's another piece there that comes into play with a lot of these technologies, especially your collaboration tools, is how are they using that access? It's not just can they log into Slack? Can they log into Teams? Are they in the right channels, in the right groups in Azure AD? But what are they doing when they're in there? If you've got somebody who is hired to be an IT help desk professional and they're in Slack and they're in the IT help desk channel, they are the right people with the right access to the right thing at the right time. But if they are publishing user passwords in that channel, they are not using that access appropriately. And for the Slack users here, here's one of my little takeaways. Go into your Slack instance, not right now, because I'd hate to have you crying before we're done with the conversation this morning. Go into your Slack instance and search for the word password or private or key. Look for some words that your developers may be sharing with other developers to help them understand how to fix an issue in code. Very popular tool in the developer community and for developers who aren't security minded or haven't gone through some of the same awareness training, they may not realize that by publishing that information to a single Slack channel, they've now published it to anybody, including that attacker who buys the token on the dark web and then logs into your Slack instance and can see things that they shouldn't see. So do that asset inventory first of all these collaboration and social channels. Understand how your people are using them. Understand what capabilities you have to interact with them. And then look at everything through that identity lens to understand whether or not your identity controls are in place, that you've centralized all this login activity and multi-factor activity and logging and monitoring activity. And then take a look at your written policies. What do your written policies say about social and collaboration platforms? Chances are you've seen at least one Marvel movie. They are very hard to avoid. As a lifelong comic book fan, I am not even trying to avoid them. We saw Captain America, the Winter Soldier in theaters, and I was enraptured. It's, as a privacy advocate, there's a lot to this story that, comic books aside, that I really dug. But I can watch this World War II super soldier who was frozen in ice for decades and came back and now has these superhuman abilities fighting this international crime organization with this Russian agent, and the sleeper soldier with the metal arm, and he's got the vibranium shield. I can watch all of this and be absolutely lost in the movie, right? Suspension of disbelief is in full effect. In the middle of this movie, one of the people reaches across the aisle to another and says, "Hey, have you checked that person's PDA to see if they've got information on it?" And in the midst of all this craziness, my suspension of disbelief gone. Because in this day and time, how many of us use the acronym PDA? It was the weirdest thing, but it threw me out of the movie. And I cannot watch that movie and watch that scene and stay in the movie, because they were using terminology that was not exactly current for everything else that was happening in the story. And so go look at your policies and say, do we even say anything about these social and collaboration channels? Are we using language that isn't relevant to our people? If your policies don't say anything about TikTok, yeah, you're missing something. One of the most explosive platforms in social that you have multiple people at your organization using as content creators, as consumers. But are you even looking at it? Are you even considering it? So with your acceptable use policy, what's okay for us to do as a representative of this organization? What can we publish on this platform? Even if you hopefully have drawn a line between personal life and professional life, having reasonable expectations of acceptable use is helpful for people who don't know or don't understand what these threats are. Look at your data classification policy. Where are you able to share data, university data, research data? Can you put it in certain platforms? You may not want to share it over Zoom. You may not want people talking about it or sharing it in shared drives that aren't managed by your organization. Look at your identity policy and privacy. And I hope you've been sitting there thinking, Jared, when are we going to talk about privacy? We cannot look at these social channels for people. We cannot lean into their personal life and try to impose. I'm not going to say yes or no to that. I'm a supporter of the EFF, big advocate for their mission as an organization, and a huge advocate for digital privacy. But I also want to help people be safe online. And there is a balance to be struck between what we see and what we enforce. And that's for you and your folks to decide, not for me to tell you. But you got to put it in policy, folks. You've got to write it down. And one example I can point to let's look at acceptable use for a second. If you go to LinkedIn and search for the company Undisclosed, there are nearly 2,000 employees who work here. Not a real company. This is a catch-all that people use when they don't want folks to know where they work. Well, in a collaboration world, you don't necessarily want to hide that you're a researcher at a particular university if you want people to find you, right? I know in my space, I am very public with where I work because I want to interact with people. I want them to know who I am and what I'm doing. But I do know organizations that have policies in place where for certain individuals, this is where they work. within your job description, and this is a great one, don't talk about any technologies. Don't list your technology stack in your LinkedIn profile, because anybody who can read the profile now has open source intelligence about your organization. Once they compromise you, they already know what technology to go after. So just giving people some guidance into what should you consider with social profiles? How are you using them? If you don't need it, delete it. That's not a bad practice. But at the same time, you can take steps to hide information from people who maybe shouldn't have access to it. And if you have any questions about digital privacy and how that overlaps with what you're trying to do in your social channels, the EFF has an entire section of their website dedicated to privacy. They've got resources, they've got tools, they've got guides, so much information that can help you make a more informed decision about how your organization is going to manage these privacy concerns, while at the same time protecting people from the Mia Ashes and the Marcella Floreses and the Kumsong 121s. So here at the end, as I mentioned, I like to share information that's useful and practical. I've taken those 3 questions and just put a quick checklist together. The 3 things that I would recommend doing: visibility into those channels. What are you using them? Why are you using them? Who owns them? Who manages them? Try to link access to a university directory. Single sign-on with MFA. It's tremendous. It makes it very difficult for an attacker to compromise anything, and it makes it easier to contain incidents if you've linked it all back to a centralized identity that you can then contain an entire identity once you detect a single account's been compromised. It also gives you the ability to identify dormant accounts in SaaS apps, which is far too common. Someone leaves a university, but nobody tells anybody and nobody shuts off their account. So it's just out there for an attacker to use. You may or may not do this with social platforms, but with any collaboration tools, absolutely. And then update your policies. I say here, everything's in scope. I know that's a bit bold, but I think it is. You should have some expectation for how people are using these technologies. Even if you don't enforce controls, even if you don't get into their social channels, you should provide, at the very least, guidelines, if not a policy, on how to use them in a way that protects themselves, their family, and the organization. And then, of course, all the links to everything that I have spoken about today, I've included here. So I would encourage you to download the presentation, share it with your teams, make sure that other people have access to this information, because it's only going to help them move more quickly to a more secure, stable operating environment. And it's going to help them minimize that disruption so that the universities can continue to do research, can continue to provide education, can continue to do the things that we rely on you so much for, just to help make things better. So please, I would encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's get on social. Please don't try to social engineer me or send me malicious files. But if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, I am not a hard person to find. I've also got my email address and phone number here for work if you wanted to have a conversation. My goal in this space is to help people be successful, to help people build careers where they can go in and help protect organizations and people, and to help teams within these organizations understand a strategy that aligns with the organization's business goals and practical, useful information that they can apply on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you're enjoying the event and the other talks, and please reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help. Take care.